Hello there, fellow explorer. Episode 4 of the Vintage Pilot School podcast already, coming to you from Requena in the Comunidad Valenciana. It's rather chilly inside my recording wardrobe today because winter is coming very fast here, but that will not stop us from touching upon a variety of topics, including the likelihood of surviving a crash landing, the utter inability of Spanish people to be on time with anything, and also, of course, some first-hand stories by yours truly about how it feels to be holding the controls of an aeroplane. Jingle, please. Sometimes I find myself in a stressful situation where I start questioning my own ability to execute on anything, and where I wish I was just sat at home with a packet of biscuits within reach, watching a David Attenborough documentary on the mating behaviour of water beetles. And I experienced one of those self-inflicted stressful moments just the other week when I found myself strapped into the left front seat of a tiny Piper Warrior aircraft, and I was left with no other option than to do as my instructor, who was sat next to me, had just told me, and fly the flipping plane. What I was supposed to do was very routine to him, but rather daunting to me. And for the record, me, that's someone with, at that time, 50 hours of theoretical instruction under his belt, and one fun aerial baptism 2 years ago. But before we get to the essence of that story, let me first tell you about my trip to the, and I quote, Analclinic. Don't Google it, you might end up in the wrong place.
Analclinic cumple 35 años al servicio de los valencianos. En esta larga trayectoria, la empresa ha incrementado...
Yes, thank you very much indeed. The Analclinic, or in full Laboratorio de Análisis Clínicos, has been providing services to the people of Valencia for over 30 years now. Definitely not translation services into English, that's quite apparent, but what they do very well is scare the living daylights out of foreigners who simply want to learn to fly an aeroplane and come to their specialised aeronautical department for the compulsory medical screening for pilots. It's essentially a medical checkup with a series of small tests that everybody who wants to fly has to pass. Back in the 1940s, when flying just took off, there wasn't so much of an emphasis on pilots' health because survival rates during the Second World War were suboptimal anyway. But these days, anyone who wants to take to the air has to undergo regular screenings. In fact, the pilots who fly commercial airliners have to have their medical license renewed every year, so regulations these days are pretty strict, and you can rest assured that the crew who fly you to your Greek resort every year are in reasonably good shape. For me, it was going to be a walk in the park, I thought, other than the fact that I recently started wearing glasses for things like going to the cinema, so I'm very well aware that I'll never be able to take a cockpit selfie without a set of spectacles in close proximity to what used to be my best sense organ. So I was quite happy to arrive on their doorstep just outside the centre of Valencia for an appointment. Now, the mere fact that I had an appointment at the medical centre is a divine miracle in itself in this country. The Spanish language doesn't even have a word for appointment. In the same way, there is no translation for concepts like early morning or on time. Whatever you try to plan more than, let's say, 3 minutes in advance, I can guarantee you something will happen. A Spanish grandmother might walk in, it might start raining, it might stop raining, someone might get hungry and not want to go out anymore, or no longer be hungry and also not want to go out anymore, or no longer feel like going out because of some inexplicable reason. Some might call it flexible, I call it utterly dysfunctional. So you can imagine I was quite thrilled for my appointment at the Analclinic at a pre-arranged time for a series of checks that would allow me to conquer the skies. The tests themselves actually went quite smoothly. Blood samples, ECG, audiogram, the usual. The only minor drawback was the fact that it was all in Spanish. Now, my medical vocab is not the widest ranging, but we got by just fine in the end. What I wasn't expecting, though, was the 2-hour wait after all the checks just to see the qualified aeronautical specialist who had to sign off on my piece of paper. When I finally was admitted into her office, the lady didn't really speak herself, but just let her endless qualifications that were hanging on the wall do the talking for her. Fortunately, everything turned out okay, and when I received my test results a week or so later, I was of course very proud to have tested negative on amphetamines, cocaine, cannabis, and other opiates.
This is just the beginning of the training. The beginning of 5 long months of very clever, very dull men looking at machinery.
I'd actually initially come here with the naive idea that I would be able to get into the cockpit and start flying pretty much in the first week, but of course in hindsight that is not so realistic, and you'll get much more out of your flying training if you know what you're doing and why the aircraft responds in the way it does. So I spent a fair share of my first 2 weeks in a classroom where my instructor, Miguel, patiently explained everything ranging from meteorology and cloud formation to human errors and crash statistics. I actually made the fatal mistake of asking my instructor where in the vicinity of the aerodrome we should try to land in case of an engine failure. I thought there would be plenty of suitable landing ground in the plains of Requena, but no. Oh, Thomas, the truth is, the grapevines are no good. The branches are too stiff, and you will crash immediately. The rocks are also very unfriendly terrain. You will crash. Now, the motorway, that's not good either. There are cars everywhere and too many signposts in the way of the wings. The secondary roads are just not wide enough, and your wheels will sink into the gravel. Just try to make it back to the airfield. If not, it's quite simple. Your plane will flip over, and the impact of that will break your neck instantly. Well, thanks for that, Miguel. Very, very helpful. So no need to worry about getting burned alive or getting your legs chopped off by the engine that gets rammed into your stomach. You'll probably have died a quick death already. My flight instructor presented this piece of information as if it was a positive thing, so I suppose that's how I'll have to take it. Speaking of flying and health, my 1940s flying book of course doesn't really mention anything about it, but the modern day textbooks are quite extensive with their advice on how to be a healthy pilot. I will quote from the Oxford Aviation Academy's Private Pilot Handbook on Human Performance. A high standard of personal hygiene must be practiced if the body is to remain healthy and free from infection. Some of the elementary precautions which help ensure personal hygiene are as follows. Item 1. Careful and daily cleansing of the body, including scalp, gums and teeth. Item 2. Washing and drying hands after using the toilet. And so on. I think you get the idea. Another discrepancy that I've spotted between today's syllabus and the piloting guide from the Second World War is the absence of any aerobatic manoeuvres in the modern textbooks. Nigel Tanguy's guide features an entire chapter on special acrobatic air manoeuvres, such as loops and rolls, and I checked, but barrel rolls are definitely not on the list of requirements for a pilot's license today, although it would add a nice challenge, of course. Here's a slightly shortened extract of what Squadron Leader Tanguy had to say about the roll in 1939, just as a friendly piece of advice to nervous airmen.
I have to admit that the loop is one of the easiest maneuvers in flying. Before doing a loop, it is necessary to gain a little extra speed. Observe and note some spot on the horizon on which you must come out of the loop, so that you may be sure of doing a straight one. When you have done so, start easing back the stick gently but firmly and push the throttle full open. As the machine mounts up and over, it obviously loses speed rapidly, and this in turn reduces the effect of the controls. When you are upside down, shut off the throttle. The engine will stop anyhow when it's upside down, and keep the stick back until the nose drops. When you are flying level, you can open up the engine again.
Nigel Tanguy certainly made it sound easy, but there is of course a reason why it's not in the curriculum anymore. So after all this time of theory in the classroom, I felt quite prepared for some leisurely familiarisation with the aircraft and its behaviour in the air. Maybe I would even get the time to take a picture to send to my friends and my grandmother, and also perhaps admire the view for a bit. But how naive I was. First thing was the so-called walk-around, where you do a visual inspection of the outside of the aeroplane. Now, I knew roughly how this was supposed to work, and there's nothing innately difficult about it, but somehow it stressed me out a bit to pretend to know just what a properly inflated tyre looks like, or whether the fuel inside the tank was looking pure enough to keep the engine running. After we'd done that, it was time to climb into the cockpit and run through the rest of the pre-flight checks. I don't even have a system yet to organise myself, and in all the self-inflicted rush, I'd forgotten to take one of the school's headsets inside the plane, because I don't have my own yet. So that meant I had to climb back out, rookie mistake, but hey, I'll get my revenge at some point, I think. On a side note, while I was browsing the internet for headsets the other day, I came across a very peculiarly shaped headset called Mutt Muffs, and I thought they were rather odd looking and not so expensive either. Now, turned out they're actually ear protection for dogs, because, well, we'll let the salespeople do the talking.
Tell us what Mutt Muffs are.
Mutt Muffs are hearing protection for dogs. And although our primary market is aviation, because pilots just don't need to be told how loud their airplane is. They already know it. And dogs have very sensitive hearing, so it was just such a match. I mean, when I started flying with my dog, it just killed me knowing how loud it was.
Very well. Now, I've never seen a dog going up for a spin in a Cessna or a Piper, but I'm sure the US have entirely different standards when it comes to recreational flying. So, like I said, what I'd been expecting for my first actual practical flying lesson was just a bit of a gentle spin, really, where my instructor for the day, Emilio, would do all the work for me, make sure I didn't feel too sick after a turn or two, maybe let me take a few pictures, and then slowly introduce me to perhaps taking the controls gently and trying to stay level in that flying death machine 3,000 feet above the ground. But no way, Jose, it was all up to Thomas to take the flying lawnmower into the air. Which I did, but not in the most gentle of ways. But it is quite an amazing thing to do. It's a great feeling, I have to say. Anyone with a tiny bit of an adventurous spirit should do an aerial baptism at some point. I can wholly recommend it. And we did get there in the end with their basic flying manoeuvres and exploring the area and the different landmarks for navigation, although I somehow felt uncomfortable doing the very last bit of the landing. I was just really afraid I was going to make some sort of mistake and crash the plane into the ground and break my neck, just like the other instructor had explained to me the other day. But fortunately, Amelia was there to save the day and put us on the ground safely. I did really like doing the radio communications though. I wonder why.
Regular radio, Apple 52 Papa Golf, taxiing to Hotel 1 for runway 12.
I'm in trouble, mayday, mayday, mayday!
November 9815, Link, Fort Dodge Radio, go ahead.
I'm in no idea where I'm going. I'm going to crash, mayday, mayday, mayday!
9815, let me say last known position.
I have no idea, mayday, 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 I'm going to crash!
9815, let me say altitude.
Rolling, I'm rolling, I'm rolling, I'm rolling, I'm rolling! Oh my God! Help! Help!
Okay, that last bit wasn't me, fortunately. This will do for our fourth episode. I will now vacate your ears and clear you to listen to the unpolished and incoherent noises of the outside world. If you have any comments or suggestions, please do let me know. I love a bit of attention just as much as you do. And make sure to subscribe to the Facebook page and to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you usually get your podcasts from. And share it with your friends, family, housemates, or your pet alpaca. The links to all the audio footage used in this episode can be found on the blog page. For now, goodbye.